Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ministers Miller and Vandal and officials for joining our committee for estimates today. My first question through you, Mr. Chair, is for Minister Miller. The main estimates for the upcoming fiscal year include $1.2 billion in funding to implement comprehensive land claims, self-government agreements, and other agreements to address Section 35 rights. How does this funding relate to your commitment to land back that you stated when you were first appointed as Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations?
In part, Patrick, it ties directly into that comment. I think the comment that I made is one that is important for someone in my position and the positions that we all hold to realize is the reality of our history, which is our relationship is based in land and has been broken by at times the theft of land, dispossession of land through other means, and the injustice that created and the corresponding legal remedies that are being exercised today in court. More often than not, the facts are not in Canada's favour. And that has resulted in very large monetary compensations. The amounts that you see in the estimates are ones that are coming to fruition. Out of respect for the communities in question, one of which is in Alberta, there are a few very large ones on the horizon, and thanks to the engagement of the community foremost in getting that done. Often there are situations where land cannot be restored because there are people on it, and despite what you've often heard about things, there is a desire by Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities to get along, and some very good partnerships. No one's asking anyone to go anywhere, but people are just asking to get along and to achieve justice. That includes restoration of land, and where that is not possible, monetary funds to the extent that can substitute it adequately. So as I look to my department for more innovative solutions, including direct negotiations with provinces for better access to lands on treaty land entitlement basis, mostly in the prairies. This is work that needs to continue, but to the extent that we can't replace with land or where that's not desirable, the compensation through monetary, as I mentioned in my introductory comments, reparations and restorative justice.
Thank you. And maybe continuing on this line, many First Nations across BC have completely given up on the modern treaty process just because of the astronomical cost in legal fees and the many decades that it's been taking to come to resolutions. And ironically, it's actually made pathways through the court much more attractive. But at the same time, we've seen the provincial government in BC move relatively swiftly to conclude comprehensive foundation agreements with several First Nations, including one in my riding. In the departmental plan, it says that it will accelerate the renewal of the relationship with Indigenous peoples by increasing the number of treaties, self-government agreements, and other constructive agreements, using an approach based on the affirmation of rights and by reform of policies to ensure that they align with partner expectations. And there's a combined almost $450 million in these estimates in support of treaty negotiations, both past and present. So I was hoping you could explain to this committee at this point if the ministry is faced with a lack of resources for these negotiations, and or what the ministry plans to do to speed up some of the relatively glacial pace of the self-government negotiations and other constructive arrangements with First Nations.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I think it calls into question some of the principles we've stated quite clearly as a government about renewing our relationship and working on a nation-to-nation basis, going at the pace of the communities, and sort of the square approach that we have at times been accused, rightly so, of taking with respect to communities that want a little rounder solution. Ironically, even more so, to your comments, Patrick, where we've had successes more often than not has been in the West, with a few notable exceptions where I come from. But the pace is slow. I don't think we can deny that. There is there's a multi-governmental approach that needs to be taken when we talk about fisheries or defense or natural resources, provincial government involvement. These are all elements that do slow down the pace. Clearly, the resources that we've allocated in the last 5 years have been significant. We have hundreds of negotiation tables of various natures, whether they're sectoral or not. The modern treaty process is a slow process, But I think we have to realize as a country that what we have as a set of tools needs to be expanded for communities that just refuse as a starter to get into those discussions, and it forces those communities into the devil they know, which is the Indian Act, and that is an absolutely unacceptable proposition to hear in this day and age. So, internally reflecting on it, we've got to get smarter about what we're doing. There are some great, I think about the sea shelf in your riding, Patrick, and that there is some good news on the horizon there, hopefully. But obviously the pace isn't at the pace that we would hold ourselves to, and indeed the communities and nations expect us to move at. You get into treaty areas in the prairies, you get into rather numbered treaty areas, you get into peace and friendship treaties in my neck of the woods, and the relationship gets much more complex. So there's a lot of work to do, and it's stuff that we have to be open-eyed about. But clearly the resources that we are now deploying, particularly coming out of 2 years of pandemic, are such that we feel we can make some significant progress. But I think people are expecting more results quicker, and I don't object to that point.